Yes. Hey, and that was faster than I thought. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning into the BAMF podcast. And without delay, let me play the opening intro, musical intro that proves we're a high production values professional operation. 1 second. God damn, it's impressive. More every time I see it. Welcome to the show with a great boss, Mr. McLaughlin, right here next to me in an orange shirt that I can't make out the words on.
This is my official Dragon Sound shirt for everybody that knows the glory of Miami Connection.
You have to tell me about that. That sounds cool, but I don't know what that means.
Well, short version, a South Korean Taekwondo champion took all his tournament winnings and decided to make a film starring his karate students. And in the middle of it was like, in addition to being martial artists, we should be a band.
I would watch that movie.
And it got weirder from there.
All right. I just saw Best of the Best 2 nights ago. Which, anyway. Also with us, directly beneath me in the Brady Bunch grid, is Ms. Shannon Watkins. How are you doing, Shannon?
Doing great. How are you?
I am awesome. Could you give us a brief introduction for any uncultured Philistines watching us who might not be familiar with your work?
I have an essay in Christopher's book, and that's my claim to fame. If you know, I would be amazed if anyone did, not because it's not good, just because it's not really famous. My friend Brian Lilly up in Michigan has a blog he used to update every October called 31 Half October, and I have an essay in 2 of those, and that's it. That's where you would know me.
Shannon is also way too modest to tell you that she is an award-winning journalist and is still among that sainted class of ink-stained people who stand between us and tyranny.
Well, thank you. I do my best. I have the Virginia Press Association Awards, which is really nice, but that and $5 will get you coffee at Starbucks.
No, I understand. I won Best Investigative Piece in a weekly newspaper in the late 90s in central Indiana. So, I'm right there with you.
Awesome.
And later that year, I had a paycheck bounce from that same newspaper. So,
That's familiar.
And last but not least, caddy corner in the Brady Bunch grid is Mr. James Lowder. James, good to have you, sir. And could you give a brief introduction to acquaint our viewers?
So I've been working in publishing as a writer and editor since the late 80s. I did a stint at TSR in the book department as a writer and editor. Did some game design and editing for them as well, mostly working on the Forgotten Realms and Ravenloft. Been a freelancer full-time since the early 90s. I've worked for most of the big companies. At the moment, I'm the executive editor and fiction wrangler and sometimes licensed guy for Chaosium. And the film connections for this, since we're talking horror movies, is I taught film in the mid-'80s. In grad school. My master's thesis is on experimental ant farm experimental films, and I've done hundreds of film and video reviews for Polyhedron, Film Facts, Sci-Fi Universe magazine, and various other venues.
Wow, cool. How do you like working at Chaosium?
Oh, they're great. I love working with them. I started off as a consultant for them in 2016, I think, helping them settle up old debt for fiction, and went from being a consultant to helping them get the fiction program ready to relaunch. And actually this week it did just relaunch. We have an anthology, Sisterhood, that is now available in ebook. It'll be available in print coming up.
If you have a link, we'll put it in the show notes, sir.
Awesome. I will provide one. And from there, I signed on as executive editor. So it's actually the exact opposite arc of my time at TSR, which started with me sort of all in and then went the other direction, going increasingly satellite as time went on. And with Chaosium, I started as a satellite, and I've been increasingly doing more and more with the company. It's a great fit. I love working with them.
Yeah. If you're a Tarantino fan, basically to Chaosium, he's the wolf. He's their Harvey Keitel.
Wow, that's high praise. All right, cool. I think I'm Jonathan Travolta to the Icons RPG for use stigma Pulp Fiction
Here we go.
metaphors.
Can I be Sam Jackson, please?
Yeah,
Sure. Sure. You
absolutely.
call dibs. You call dibs.
I was gonna say Steve Kenston is Sam Jackson, but he can be somebody else in that movie then. So, what are we talking about tonight on the Ghost Show? We are talking about horror movies, but why horror movies, you might ask? And I'll tell you, gentle viewer. Mr. McLaughlin, the Ghost Show boss, is running a Kickstarter. Oh my God, talking about Kickstarters on podcasts? No, but yes, we are. The Transgressive Horror Podcast is running for 3 more days. And oh my God, we are so close. We're 77% last time I did the math with 3 days left. So it's a fun book. You've been watching our podcast on Sunday nights. You have seen several of the authors on talking about their giving witty and urbane deconstructions of the horror genre. And you can't miss this. Your existence on this planet as a human will be poor if you don't read this book. And you owe it to yourself, your family, your friends. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. Someone else got a better pitch line for this because I'm straying into excess here.
We're 62 people away from being able to make this book and rock your socks off and turn this into a series and continue to say witty and imaginative and informative things about film, all in a company where creators get treated like rock stars and not being treated like rented mules and being beaten accordingly. And so if any of that appeals to you, please back us. We're 62 people away, and or less if you want to take the reward levels where we'll happily put your name in it and thank you. Or if you have a spare C note burning a hole in your pocket, you could actually be in one of these grids. We have a new reward level where you can sit on the show with us and you can tell us about horror movies. Or if you really want to be power mad, we've already had one lovely person fork over the money to make us do the essay they want to see in the book. So there you go. We will let you tell us what to write about. There you go. You're the boss. You're the god. You're the god.
What pain do you want to inflict on someone else?
They'll probably see me like El Topo.
Make somebody watch Requiem for a Dream again.
Oh God, no! Oh God, that was so terrible. It was so depressing.
Well,
that was bad.
The Requiem for a Dream. I went to see that with somebody who had just lost his job and his girlfriend had broken up. And that was my suggestion for the movie we go see. So we get through at the end of the film and the credits roll, and the 3 women in front of us are literally in tears, and they stagger out of the movie, and he stands up and says, "Well, I feel pretty good about my life."
That's the way to do it.
I got a bunch of jokes about that movie, but none of them are appropriate for
Oh my!
a cultured crowd like we have tonight. So I don't want to try any of them out. But yeah, but you can make someone write about that movie if you want. That's on the table.
You want us to do a Serbian film? We'll do a Serbian film. Whatever.
Yeah.
I may need to drink a bottle of tequila before I watch it. But you pays your money, you get your movie.
Yep.
Yeah, and you really you want to go ahead and buy that level before I get to it, because if we get close to funding, I'm just gonna buy up all the slides left in that level and make Chris write about the Happy Time murders. So Chris doesn't want that, so save him from that. All right. Sorry, too much desperate comic excess. Please back the Kickstarter. Please tell your friends about it. Share it on social media, because oh my God, we're so close. And I'll be showing the banner throughout the show. And well, I almost felt like I was doing PBS there for a second.
Yeah, you had that PBS vibe.
Yeah, we should have had tote bags and coffee.
We should. Volume 2, tote bags.
Okay. Yep. And now that we're 10 minutes in, let's talk about the movies we're talking about. Ms. Watkins, directly beneath me, will be talking about Alien, classic, and Mr. Lowder will be talking about Witchfinder General with Vincent Price from 1968.
Yep.
Okay, cool. And let's see, who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Shannon.
Okay. I knew you guys would throw me under the bus. It's okay. It's okay.
Well, if you guys want, I can play the trailer for Happy Time Murders, and Chris can talk about what he will write. I guess that's some of Melissa McCarthy's finest work, Chris. I think you might, if you take some time with it. I think. All right.
You know, an hour ago, I was sitting in a theater watching The Departed, and you're going to do that to me.
I'm a bad man. I apologize. All right, let me cue up the trailer for Alien, and I will have this playing silently in the background so that the bots on YouTube don't find us and slap us with takedown notices. And Shannon, why did you choose this movie to write about for the anthology?
I actually, for once in my life, was ahead of the curve. I had heard people say before, I wasn't the one who made the original observation that it's technically science fiction, but it's really a haunted house movie set in space. And I weirdly enough, people had talked about it a little before. I think a month after I started writing it, and there was like a 3-day kerfuffle online where everyone was talking about it, I guess because there was nothing else going on, and having this big argument. What is it? Is it a horror movie? Is it a science fiction movie? And I mean, why argue? It's a good movie. It's a really good movie. And to me, just because the alien is, just so terrifying, and they are not able to escape, because where would you go? It's definitely a horror movie, and a really incredibly well done one, and disguised as science fiction. And my argument was, it's not just a horror movie, it's a gothic horror film. And you'll have to read the book. You'll have to fund it to find out why. But John Hurt, his character, I believe that was Kane, is actually the gothic heroine of the film. But I'm not going to explain any further. And that's me getting really weird and theoretical about it.
Well, I have lots of follow-up questions. I guess I'll have to buy the book.
You will. You absolutely will. Throw whatever at me. I'll dance around things if I have to. It's okay.
I had never thought of that as a haunted house movie before, but it makes perfect sense.
I want to say Stephen King was the first one who actually said that, and I swear I want to say I read it in some essay he had done, but I looked and couldn't find it, so I may just be making that up. Well,
I can totally see it. I think it's a terrifying movie, but I've had trouble getting people younger than me to watch it just because it's got that kind of 70s slow burn going on.
Oh, yeah, it does. You go back and look at stuff from then, and you're like, I can see why this is a great film, and you can see where this led to things being like they are now. But then you really watch it, and you're like, yeah, they spend so much time building up. The shots are slow, where it's not like jump, 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 jump. And that kind of adds a sense of realism, I think, just because I read, when you see jump cuts, your brain subconsciously goes, this isn't real. Look at all this. Your vision doesn't do that. But the longer a scene holds, especially if it's at a medium shot or something, because I think that's the equivalent of human vision, the more it feels real to you and the more it fools you into thinking it's a real thing that's happening. So that's why even if the special effects aren't as good as the stuff you see today, sometimes they're better. It's much better because some CGI is crap. But
dude, you may want to trigger warning 50-year-old movie here.
Oh, okay. If there's going to be something coming out of this guy's chest in about 3 seconds, so if that bothers you might want to turn away. It's going to be gross. So now you know. All right. Sorry. Please continue.
But that's what I have to say. And my best friend, I think, is watching this, and she just said, Predator can beat Alien, period. That's not the point. That's not the point. Amy, stop it. It's not the point.
Volume 2. We'll get into that Volume 2.
Yeah, see, I think every other Alien movie is kind of a pale shadow of this one, because once you start explaining the alien, once you can see the alien,
right,
it loses so much. And what this movie had, the mystery, because you don't ever get a really good look at it throughout the whole thing.
Right, exactly.
And, I enjoyed Aliens for what it is, which is basically military science fiction action adventure. But it's a strange cousin to this one. Good.
Yes, and that was made in the 80s when. It was a very masculine, very, macho aesthetic, and let's blow shit up. And I actually mentioned, I think I mentioned, I know I wrote it, I may have edited it out. that Vasquez, remember her? She was so much fun. She was like the polar opposite of John Hurt in this movie. I mean, she's like hyper butch and like swaggering and just really like she's almost overtly a lesbian, but not quite. They couldn't say it in any way. There wasn't anyone, I guess, for her she didn't fall in love with any of the other. I don't remember her falling in love with any other female characters, but she's like got that whole thing going on. And then John Hurt was like very, oh my gosh, I'm reading this thing too. Smart kid, because I was like a lot older than 12 when I saw it. But whereas John Hurt's character was a lot more kind of not exactly feminine, but very fluid, I guess, in a certain way. I'm sorry that I go into that in the essay I wrote.
You know, it's always fascinated me about this film that nobody who watches horror or the hybrid with science fiction is a stranger to the movie that can't afford really good special effects, so they try to cover up their technical inefficiencies by keeping the monster in the shadows. You know, when I first started really learning about this movie, seeing it pop up in like Famous Monsters or Starlog or whatever, and you could see still photos of the monster. This was a movie with solid special effects and a monster that would actually stand up to close scrutiny, and they kept it hidden anyway.
Right.
Oh, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it. The alien's being blasted out of the airlock right now.
Well, they famously got that movie from the 1958 classic "It: The Terror from Beyond Space," so it's already been spoiled.
Fair enough.
I saw that too, and it was interesting, but it was definitely a very 50s film. It was probably really scary for the time, but at the same time, it had that kind of really hard camp. Well, now when you see it like now, it's like this is just the campiest thing ever. Like, when is Divine going to come out and do with the Watusi or something? So it was a good film. It was a fun film.
When I tipped her off that she should probably watch that as background material, she asked me what it was like, and I said, "You're kind of downshifting from Sigourney Weaver's Ripley to a film where all the women are fighting to be the first to say, 'I'll make some coffee.'"
Yes. Oh God. It was very different. It was, although do know, remember, even in 2001: A Space Odyssey, they had space stewardesses delivering breakfast to the astronauts. So that whole concept, aesthetically, it was different, but politically, it stayed the same for a while. So I'm glad by 77, 79, we had Sigourney Weaver in there. So that's good.
It'd be interesting to do a compare and contrast of female characters in the Alien franchise from then till now, because I'm not. Well, it stops being pure horror and just kind of becomes that action horror hybrid. And I don't know. I'm not a big fan. I've had to sit through a few of them because my wife's a fan, and they haven't really appealed to me. So I don't know. Maybe you guys disagree.
I know that, and I'm sorry, I'm running with the ball a lot here. The late humorist Cynthia Heimel, who I adored her work, she wasn't into that sort of thing, but she was writing about back in the late 80s, early 90s. She wrote an essay about feminism in film and women in film, and she was like, she didn't like Sigourney Weaver's character. She was like, and I think this does speak to a little bit about. I mean, this is a very side note thing, but it speaks to a little bit about how the movies work. Like, if something was going to set up light housekeeping in my stomach, I'd want her character there, but she's not someone I go out for coffee with. I mean, she's not girly, but she's a female warrior type. Like, you don't see a lot of, I don't know, natural, I guess what we consider everyday sexual politics in those films. Everyone's kind of asexual in a way. It's not about warmth and kindness and sweetness. I mean, she's the person Sigourney Weaver's nicest to is the cat. So,
But Sigourney Weaver, in Alien, Sigourney Weaver is professional, which is that's the thing. I mean, she's competent.
Right. It's good for what it is. It's just if you want to go in and see, people who are like madly in love, or or really what she's warm with Newt because she's lost her daughter. But even so, there's just sort of the whole franchise, because of the nature, just sort of has this kind of cool remove to me amongst the human subjects. I don't know how to put it any better than that.
Yeah, there was a whole romance subplot between her and Tom Skerritt that got cut out of it, And in a way, that's a cut that really does kind of redirect the whole franchise a bit, if you think about it.
I think it's better if they didn't have that in there. I mean, that's just me talking. I don't know. But I mean, a friend of mine noted that if they'd been in deep space that long altogether, probably the entire crew slept with each other one way or another. So, but it's to the point where by then they were also used to each other. It wouldn't have been sexual. It's just a bunch of people who worked together and had sex, because what else are you going to do in deep space, I guess?
Well, but if you and especially if you look at the first movie as a horror film, it becomes a matter then if you introduce that sex romance subplot, you're setting up the character to get killed.
Yeah.
Of course, if you have sex in a horror film, you've broken one of the laws, and then Jason can come get you.
Yeah. And then it adds a whole other emotional element that may drag it a little further into romance or sort of muddy the waters, the thematic waters of it.
Yeah.
And you don't really want that.
Yeah, and it undercuts the idea that, how does Ripley survive to the end of the film? By being professional and competent.
Right.
She doesn't make the mistakes that the other characters make because they line themselves up by doing dumb things.
Exactly. He remains very dispassionate in a way.
Yep. And that's the triumph of logic and reason over the unknown.
Right.
That's
an
interesting question, Sean. I'm not sure. Have you heard that rumor?
She was supposed to be male, and then one of the studio executives actually was like, I think they were trying to I want to say they were trying to capitalize on Star Wars because Leia was female, and said, just make her, I don't know, make him a lady. And I mean, it wasn't like this big enlightened thing. It was just like, yeah, this is a trend. Let's do that. The gals will like it or whatever.
But you just think about what positive thing that decision, which could have been made for an unenlightened reason.
Exactly. I mean, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'm good for that. So yeah.
Well, hey, James, would you like to talk about Witchfinder General? And I'll put that trailer up.
So this is a great segue point because, of course, Michael Reeves originally did not want Vincent Price in Witchfinder General as his lead. He wanted Donald Sutherland.
Pleasant.
And it would have been a completely different film with that sort of general schlubby sort of ineffectual functionary Witchfinder General, and it would have been brilliant, but it would have been a very different film. And when they made their Tygon made their deal to get the film distributed in the U.S., the two big ones the two big concessions. One was that Price had to be in it. The other was that for the U.S. release, they would name it Conqueror Worm and have to tie in with the Poe films at the time, and have the opening and closing voiceover tying into the Poe poem. So what you end up with is one of the strongest points of the film. One of the things that makes it, as a film within the context of pop culture and film history, so disturbing, because you get Vincent Price playing completely against what Vincent Price had been playing up until then. That expectation that this is going to be, what would later be like the Dr. Phibes or Theater of Blood movies, where there's a wink along with the scares, that Price is playing that older 1950s House of Wax kind of villain. It's not real terror. It's not real horror. And you do not get that by the end of Witchfinder General. You wait for that wink, and it never comes.
So I'm unenlightened. I have never seen this movie before. Can you tell me a little bit about what happens?
So in the film, Price plays Matthew Hopkins, the Witchfinder General. It's English Civil War, Cavaliers and Roundheads, and Price is using that chaos of the English Civil War to make a lot of money by going around and trying women and mostly women, but also priests and other people fall under his eye as servants of the devil. And the central conflict becomes the sort of heroic soldier Ian Ogilvy and his demure love interest fall in bad with Price because of local politics, and then it becomes what is essentially an English Civil War Western revenge drama, with Ian Ogilvy hunting down Matthew Hopkins to get him back for the evil that he has done. So it ties in with it uses the same sort of structure as the Anthony Mann, Bud Boddicker revenge westerns like Winchester 73 and the Randolph Scott movie Seven Men from Now. And so it's set against the English Civil War and using the English countryside the same way those Western films use the American West as a backdrop. Except it's totally nihilistic. It has absolutely none of those Western films touch upon men who lose their reason and move outside of society to get justice. But justice still exists in those films, and Witchfinder General offers none of that. It is an incredibly bleak film,
and it gets more so with the passing of time. I would love it would be the last thing I would ever do as a professor, but I'd love to show it to like my students' age, 18, 19 in that age range, because from birth, movies have taught them that revenge is fun and glamorous. Like, wait, you're not actually seeking bloody vengeance on somebody? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, and it builds up to a completely anticlimactic, unsatisfactory ending. I won't give away the details of what happens at the end of the movie, but it's horrifying, and there is none of the, and now Randolph Scott finally catches up with the last of the seven men, or Jimmy Stewart catches up with the guy who his brother in Winchester 73 for ignobly gunning down Dad, and you get done with the movie, and it's like we were talking about Requiem for a Dream. It's got that same effect where the credits roll and you sit there slack-jawed. It's like the end of Audition, with that sort of impact on the audience where, you've been poleaxed to a certain extent, and you are left to try and contextualize what you've just seen. And it's broken so many rules and used Vincent Price in ways that completely foil what expectations were of Vincent Price films at that time. That the audience, like the reviewers, most of the reviewers at the time that the film came out, were angry about the movie because it actively foils expectations. It uses expectations about Price against the audience, and that was not necessarily something, certainly because Reeves had not Donald Sutherland, Donald Pleasance, excuse me, but with Pleasance was who Reeves wanted initially, that's the way he uses that over the course of the film. The muted performance that he has Price deliver absolutely undermines all of that.
I might check this out. This sounds really interesting. Is this one of those Hammer horror movies you hear so much about, or?
Well, it's not. It's a Tigan film, and Tigan was low rent Hammer.
That's saying something.
It is, and so they did more exploitation films, and the Tigan. There are multiple versions of this movie floating around. So there's the British cut, there's the American cut, which has the Conqueror Worm title to tie in with the Poe stuff, and the poem, Price reading parts of the Poe poem at the beginning and end. And then there's a European cut because they could get away with it, that has more breasts in it. So the tavern wench scenes go in slightly more risque directions. And that was Tigan was all right. We can cut those in. We'll deal with that later. And so they did much even more exploitation than Hammer. Hammer was restrained exploitation. Tigan was less restrained exploitation.
Yeah, but isn't it amazing that a company that was basically being run out of the change a rich guy was finding down in the cushions of his couch, they could still put this out and Blood on Satan's Claw?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, right? So you get in the end this movie that sets out to be a Donald Pleasance historical horror film, with Tigan making it an exploitation film that turns out to be something completely different because of casting and Reeves' direction. This film is a summation of themes and other things that he touched upon in the two earlier films that he'd made, She-Beast and with Barbara Steele, and The Sorcerers with Boris Karloff, both of which are much cruder films than this. They have their moments, but they are clearly exploitation films and at points fairly amateurish. But this comes together as a work that stands up. It stands up as a good film now.
Oh, don't show the end. Don't show the end.
Yeah. You don't want to show the end because your expectations as you're watching this is that it will lead to a certain kind of ending, and it builds all the way up to that, and then completely foils the expectations. So yeah, it's a really interesting film, and that's what prompted me to write about it, because it was one of those films like Eraserhead or The Exorcist or Requiem for Dream, Audition, that Eraserhead is the one of the ones that really stuck with me, because I could not go back and watch Eraserhead again for many years after seeing it the first time, because it was not what I expected, and clearly I sort of walked straight into that one, and it did exactly what Lynch was hoping it would do to me, and the same with this. I had expectations when I went in to watch this, and by the time the credits roll at the end, I was flummoxed. So it was a good movie to come back and revisit, to put my notes down and to write about for this.
Yeah, and it's rare that you find a film that has pointed things to say about politics or religion, and this film takes on both.
And the thing that was amazing watching it again a couple of times for putting my notes together for the essay, it was actually worse this time watching it than it was the first time when I was surprised.
Wow.
So I got to the end of the first time, and it was, the ending is not what I was expecting in it. And when I watched it this time and was carefully taking it apart and listening to the dialogue even more closely and knowing where it goes, it's deliberately far bleaker than even I was thinking about the first time. And the religious symbolism in it is, oh, God's watching all of this and does not care. So if you are thinking that you are Matthew Hopkins and you're going to set a pretend positive religious outlook on this, every one of the characters gets undermined in the course of this film. There is nobody left unscathed. Even the heroic Catholic priest who gets killed, by Hopkins as a papist and idolater. There's a point where he makes this casual comment to Ian Ogilvy's by now quickly becoming less heroic soldier about, well, I have a problem with the English Civil War because of all of this horrible stuff that you're doing to Christian men. Oh, so it would be okay if they weren't Christian men. And it just hangs out there like, oh, wait, wow. You're not so great either, I guess. And it just goes down from there. There's none of the characters are untouched, and none of their delusional explanations for the positive things they do are left to stand. Reeves undercuts all was
Was this commenting on? Well, that's a weird echo. Sorry. You guys hear that too?
Yeah, Chris was doing that a minute ago.
Let me mute and come back.
I shaped up. I couldn't do the whole voice of God thing any longer.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, I muted and unmuted, and hey, it seems to be gone now. So yay, technology. Is this commenting on specific political things happening in England at the time, or wider situations? Or
yeah, I mean, when you go back to The Sorcerers, Reeves was commenting there on sort of the '60s living for kicks and loose morals sort of thing. But really, by the time you get to Witchfinder General, it's about everything. It's about condemning all politics, all religion, all characters who think they're heroic, all characters who think that they're doing noble God's work. Audiences for watching these movies, because there's a condemnation about watching violence that's inherent in this film that is overtly part of both She-Beast and The Sorcerers. That's the plot of The Sorcerers is Boris Karloff and his wife they come up with this machine that lets them inhabit the psyche and control people. So they control young Ian Ogilvy, and he goes out and they basically live vicariously through him. And that ends up being a bad idea, as you might expect. And when you get to Witchfinder General, there are several scenes where the audiences are watching horrific violence and doing so placidly. They're the audience in the theater, and Reeves throws the condemnation out to that audience too. So he's making this movie and condemning people who would come see it, which again is this incredibly sort of nihilistic approach to it. And it's really an interesting exploitation thing. It's a remarkable film, and the more you go through it, the more angles there are to all of this to explore.
It sounds to me, I'll just insert this, I haven't seen it, or I feel like I've seen part of it, but it was a very long time ago. It sounds superficially, at least maybe just the subject matter, a little bit like I think it was The Devils. Oliver Reed was in it back in '71. I know it was about the Inquisition, but I don't know if it's...
Well, yeah, there was a Czech film called Witchhammer, which was done around the same time, which actually looks a lot like what Witchfinder General would have been had Donald Pleasance been the lead, because it's about a functionary who gets this power and then exploits it. There was also the Herbert Law movie Mark of the Devil, which was incredibly done as that sort of same exploitation. That was even more extreme as an exploitation film. So yeah, I mean as a subject matter, it makes perfect sense that this is one that Tygon was going to do, because Witchfinder movies allow you to show torture and have women abused and all of this standard exploitation stuff that was big in the late '60s and early '70s. And the movie transcends all of it.
Interesting. Thank you.
And yeah, it's one of the interesting, having rewatched it recently, is that I found really resonant about 2021 is that the fundamental thing that allows this suffering to go on is basically all you have to do is call somebody out for not fitting into the existing power structure. And just the not only speed but the eagerness and joyfulness which people will burn somebody alive or worse.
Well,
and living in such a polarized country, the power that we're seeing, that all it takes is an accusation to wreck somebody. That felt powerful across the decades.
Well, there's a voiceover narration at the start, which talks about the English Civil War has caused this fight between the people who are loyal to the crown and these people who are trying to change society, and that's what allows Hopkins to exist. But the other part of that that's really interesting is, again, and this is the more you look at the movie, the more people add to the, Reeves adds more and more people to the list, because he completely condemns the fact that the villagers are taking advantage of this as well, that you have Hopkins going from village to village, using this he tries to cast it as God's work. His completely brutish rapist assistant casts it as, this is going to be, we're going to make a lot of money and we have power. And then the villagers are perfectly happy to use them as tools against anybody that they don't like. Mm. And so no one escapes. Everybody is complicit in all of the horrible things that happen in this movie. And God just watches silently, and that's the end,
Oh, wow.
But I mean, that's one of the nature of a truly transgressive film, right? You get to the end of the movie, and if it's really done its work, it should make you ask two things. Why did someone make this, and why did I watch it? And if you go down and you watch films like, and the torture porn films and things like that now, Human Centipede and all of those sort of shock, gross out films. The guinea pig series in Japan and Evil Dead Trap and things like that. And they should, as movies, when you get done watching those movies, you should be able to question why they exist and why you're watching them. That's a valid response to those films. So, and sometimes the answer is because it's a good piece of art. Witchfinder General is a great film. A lot the films that people are covering in this book are defensible as many of them great films. Craig Fisher's writing about Weekend and there are great films on this list. And Audition's a great film, and Requiem for a Dream and Witchfinder General, those are all great films, and there are reasons those exist. But they challenge you.
Yeah, I'm rooting for this to fund for so many reasons, selfish and non-selfish. But one of them is I really would like to be the guy that puts out a book that has both, like, The Exorcist and I Spit on Your Grave covered, sure. And finding some common threads there.
Sure.
Well, now we've been asking some people this question for a few weeks now, so I'll give you guys a chance here. So Shannon, I'm putting you on the spot first. Yeah.
Oh God!
Did you have a runner-up choice? Did you have another film that you thought about doing for the book?
I believe
runner-up?
I did mention The Fly to you, and you were like, actually, that's more of a horror movie, because that's another one of those two that's very kind of on the fence. You can see it as sci-fi, you can see it as horror. It just depends on how you want to approach it. I might use that one actually the next time around if we get this funded. We'll see. Oh God, I gave you a list, and I can't remember what the list was. I feel so dumb, but I just, like, once I picked one, I just went with it, and that was it. But
so you're going with the Vincent Price Fly or the other Fly?
Cronenberg. Oh yes,
okay. Yeah.
I've seen the one from the 50s, and I get why it was scary. But then you see Cronenberg, and it's like, I don't know. It's like you've seen it. The one from the 50s is like, oh my God, I've never seen a shark before, and then Cronenberg is like you're out in the Pacific on a tiny raft and like the Leviathan emerges and it's like, oh my God, this just wipes out everything else. So for me anyway. So yeah. And Jeff Goldblum was easy to look at early in the movie, which didn't hurt. I didn't really like Jurassic. I'm like the one person on the planet who didn't care about Jurassic Park or the subsequent. Like it's. I get it. I understand. It just didn't do for me. But the one scene of Jeff Goldblum with his shirt open, lounging there, wounded but very brave. I can watch that over on repeat. I know a lot of ladies and a few gentlemen who can. So you know.
You and Ray Bradbury hated it, so you're in good company. I met Bradbury at Famous Monsters Con 93 months after the original one came out.
Oh.
And some innocent wide-eyed fan asked him, Mr. Bradbury, I know you're a big fan of dinosaur movies. What did you think of Jurassic Park? And Bradbury went, you meant half-Jurassic Park?
I love that.
Well,
Twice as funny coming from Ray
Bradbury. I mean, if you look at it, Bradbury and Crichton are completely the opposite approach to any of that, because Bradbury is about wonder, and science can even bring you to wonder and marvelous things, and all of the Crichton films are the same plot. Man messes around with science, man screws up, oh no, look at the horrible consequences. I mean, all of them are kind of the same thing, and it's cautionary anti-science, basically.
True. Yeah, that is true.
And it's a difference from Bradbury's idea of wonder and what his storytelling is about. They don't really get much more diametrically opposed as far as science fiction fantasy.
I don't know that I agree that they're all the same, because in the first one, Jeff Goldblum is shirtless, but in Jurassic World, Chris Pratt is shirtless. So that's a change. That's a big plot change right there. See, a lot of people don't notice the finer points, but I do. I watch very closely.
That's how the franchise has evolved.
That's right.
That's significant.
Volume 3, our favorite shirtless dude movie.
I think we should definitely do that.
Calling dibs on Magic Mike.
Of all the shirtless dude movies you have to choose from, Magic Mike actually has a surprising amount of depth. My wife forced me to watch this movie. Yeah.
We could do this book. I don't know who would read it, but we could do this book. That's the kind of writers I've got.
You'd be surprised. My older brother, who is now a holy roller, to use the polite term, he was briefly a dancer down in Florida in the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah. I asked him about it one time. He was like, I still have nightmares about long fingernails sometimes. That's all I get out of that. There's more to the story, but...
Now, perfect segue. Jim, did you have a second runner-up?
When I thought about it, it was, from what I was talking about earlier, those movies that make you think, why am I watching this? So Witchfinder General was my first choice, because I hadn't seen it in at least a decade. Requiem for a Dream was one I considered, but again, that's a movie that, do I really want to watch that again? The last 15 minutes of that movie are just harrowing. I don't want to really do that to myself again. Audition would have been on my short list. I'm glad somebody covered that. Videodrome would have been on there. Though there are there are more disturbing Cronenberg films. Dead Ringers is another one that I don't know if I ever have to watch again. I like Requiem for Dream. I saw Dead Ringers at a theater by myself. I was the only one in the audience in an afternoon matinee, and I watched the movie and I staggered out into the light afterward. And the next time I drove past that theater, it was rubble.
Wow. I
apparently had been at like one of the last shows before they tore it down, which I think was probably appropriate for that film. It just, there's nothing else to do now, but you get from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. And yeah, there are a bunch of Cronenberg films that are that would be on that list. Marvelous filmmaker.
You know, the two, if I can take a moment to brag about one of my more reclusive writers, an essay that I think the two of you might be really interested in is my good friend Robert J. Toth wrote about the Dead Zone.
Yeah.
And one of his on his list of reasons why it's transgressive is essentially that it's like that rare David Cronenberg film that you can take like normal people to go see.
It's not Crash. I mean,
or Shivers.
yeah, I like all of those movies. They're all really good films, but you know, they're definitely impactful.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, there's a long list. But I would watch, and that may be the test, right? I would watch all of those Cronenberg films again, except maybe Dead Ringers. You know, I would have to really think twice about watching Requiem for a Dream again. So maybe that makes it a good choice, you know. But yeah, there's a lot of really good films that I would have covered. I watched an awful lot of really horrible films when I was writing reviews for Polyhedron magazine. I did a video review column for them, Into the Dark, and was doing 5 or 7 movies a month usually for that, and it was all on video cassette. And basically, my criterion was whatever I could get my hands on, you know. Because if it was at the local video store, okay, we'll do this, and I can make a theme out of this for this month's movies. So it's going to be bad fantasy films. Where I did one where the linking connection was movies where people throw their swords at people in the movie.
Oh my God, I love that.
That was, which Eric Mona reminded me of years after the fact. He said, sword tossing 101 was that Into the Dark installment that you wrote. And so yeah, and I watched so many just gruesomely bad films for that.
Did you find it challenging to write a regular review column?
It was, yeah, it was, and the thing when I was writing it was the late 80s, early 90s, and I had started, and Chris and I have talked about this a little bit, some of the earliest stuff I published were video reviews for like Film Facts or book reviews for Film Facts magazine, and Sci-Fi Universe and some of the other magazines that were covering pop culture at the time. And as I was writing at the time, it was the fashion for reviews was to do these really snarky, this is pre-Mystery Science Theater stuff, or around the same time that was developing. So it was a lot of snarky, kind of edgy tone to it. And it actually got less fun to write those reviews as time went on, because it's much harder to write a good review and share what is great about a work and find things that you can recommend for people to see, which is what this book is, right? It's what the Transgressive Horror book is. These are essays about why you should watch these movies, not why you shouldn't. But it got long by the time at the end where I was actually going out of my way to try and find more good films that I could review, that I could recommend, things that were surprising to me.
Yeah, my days of journalism. You guys hear that echo again?
Yeah. Your voice is gone again.
Voice of God. All right, I think it's gone now. Yeah, I remember talking to. We went through a succession of movie reviewers at my weekly publication, and we got one guy who was reliable. He's like, everyone thinks this is the dream job until you get it, and you got to watch like 8 movies a week and write, pithy paragraphs about each one, and it can be a lot. We actually had to fire a previous reviewer to him because we caught the guy plagiarizing reviews from a paper in San Francisco.
Sure.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a surprise with when you're churning out, especially of new stuff. When you're churning out reviews, I at least had the advantage that basically the rule was it had to be available on video. I wasn't doing stuff that was out of print. I was doing stuff that was that you could rent for the most part, and at least by the middle section of, and I ended up doing like 55 issues of the magazine over the course
That was
of the time.
How many reviews per issue?
Like 5 at least.
Oh my God! Wow.
So, and I was still doing occasional reviews for other publications at the time as well.
You're a champion. You are a champion, sir.
And I was writing like novels and role-playing game stuff and everything else at the time I was doing this too. I don't know how I did it. But I came across the theme idea and started doing more, fantasy without dragons and themes like that made it at least interesting to talk about them in that larger framework. Again, like the book here is, transgressive films. That's the framework for this larger work. And that at least made it more of a challenge then, because I would drive around to all of the local video stores, start at the Blockbuster for the obvious things, and then go to the really skeevy, obscure video places for the things that they had that were, obscure 60s, 70s, things that were covered in Weldon's Psychotronic Film Encyclopedia. Oh my God, Werewolves on Wheels. I have to review this. So there's a horror film that Mo Howard was in at the end of his life. I have to review this movie. Yep, there you go. And now it's all between, and that was streaming on Amazon recently. And now all of this stuff, you can stumble across it by looking at Amazon, or it'll show up on some other, Tubi or, one of these other obscure streaming services. Or it's available on DVD or Blu-ray.
That's one of the things that I hope that I hope this becomes a series. But one of the reasons I'd love to see it become a series is we of the pre-internet generation, we had the advantage of curation. We had people to tip us to the fact that Werewolves on Wheels was a thing,
right?
And they're and God love them. I'm never would hate on young. I'm a professor. I can't hate on younger people. Never would. But these people that have grown up with access to every book ever written, every film ever made, they struggle with where to begin. And I'm hoping maybe with our books, we can kind of pay the debt back that we got with people tipping us off to cool stuff.
Well, I mean, you don't go to a video store anymore. It's you and your remote in front of Netflix or Amazon, and it's hard to. I went through a period. I broke my leg a few years ago, and I was on this short-term disability, watching lots of TV. Got through The Sopranos. Of course, I was on Vicodin for most of the time, but I was just like, I'm going to watch all the found footage horror I can.
Oh
God!
And there are some gems there.
There are
some gems. So, hey, we are about at the hour mark. I know that might be hard to believe, but we've been jawwagging here for a good little bit. Just wanted to share the Kickstarter page one more time and ask folks, please back it, please share it. If you've already backed it, tell your friends, and that is the dashboard showing where all the pledges come from. This is the actual page itself with the bloody mouth cover that is beautiful, thanks to Chris's friend Hal Mangold.
Yeah, great cover.
He's great. He's fantastic.
Yes. Yes. And before we go, I have to thank our guests especially, because I have to thank James, because James is by rights the godfather of Ghost Show. James is the guy that talked to me when I was at the absolute pit of despair over ever doing anything with words ever again. And he's the one that convinced me that this was possible, and that there are places where writers are not treated like chickens. So I owe James more than I could possibly get across, but I do need to acknowledge that he is a tremendous human being, a wonderfully talented man, and the guiding spirit behind all of this. And Shannon, 30 years we've been looking for another project to do together, and we finally did it. And
you don't even have to be a French maid for this one.
But back in my GM days. And Shannon is a great writer, and I am happy to expose more of her insight and humor to a wider audience.
Oh,
And
thank you.
one more shout out for our best guest, Sean. Sean, who Shannon, you may have seen him commenting a bit.
Yes, I
Sean
did.
is the original cover art for Noir.
Oh wow!
And
Awesome! Thank you.
Shannon's character was the inspiration for the central figure on that cover. So the corners of my life are folding together wonderfully here with this project.
As happens in publishing sometimes, yes.
Very much so. I had a great time. I've never done one of these before. I just want to say thank you to all of you. It's fantastic.
Oh,
Well, if we fund, we are considering making this a regular thing. And one of the things that I would really love to do is get together all the ladies who contributed to this project and just shut up the whole night and let women talk about horror for a solid hour.
And we want with Jeff Goldblum shirtless in the background.
I'll do everybody a favor and stay fully clothed.
All right. On that happy note, I think perhaps we should end things. So thanks to Shannon. Thanks to James. Chris, always a pleasure to have you on the air, sir. And to all of our listeners and viewers, we will catch you next time on the Ghost Show. There's an awkward